Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome back to the next iteration, whatever you want to say, of Socrates Jones, Part 6, Chapter 5. We're going with masks off. Last time we debated Karl Marx on the faulties of capitalism and the faulties of communism as well. Anyway, let's get into it, shall we? Hey, status report, what's going on in there? Still a no-go. She's being even more stubborn than usual. Her actions completely scramble the timeline, and you've seen her poll numbers. She can still get the job done? Timeline? Of course she can. Just don't forget what we put on the line. Never will. Just be careful, okay? You too. And eat something healthy. Stress burns calories. I'm hanging up now. Baby carrots! Who the fuck was that? I just accidentally slammed my desk and fucked up my hearing. Hey Mom, how you doing? I'm fine, just fine. Really? Of course not. We've been here for hours. We've knocked down philosopher after philosopher, and the gate still hasn't accepted the validity of my position. It's not the only gate that's being stubborn here. Stepping back as strategy isn't panning out. It's making us seem weak. In the last few hours, you've coddled Machiavelli, critiqued democracy, and given leeway to communism. How do you think that'll play with voters? Tendency to double down rather than reassess, rooted in childhood experience? I need to go on the offensive. I need a game changer. Whoever's next, I'm really going to let them have it. Aggressive tendencies could habitualize if not handled correctly. Who is this guy? Compounding environmental stress factors should not be ignored. Okay, hold on. Who are you? And what are you doing? Apologies, just making some initial observations to prepare for our upcoming session. I was going to let that scene play out, but I guess we'll get started. Allow me to introduce our resident psychiatrist, Frantz Fanon. Oh, we mentioned this guy earlier. Born in the French colony of Martinique in 1925, his insight has proven invaluable for many of us here. I don't need therapy. Everyone needs therapy. Being human is hard. It does no good to pretend otherwise. But I'm not here to treat you, Senator. I'm here to debate. You claim your American system is perfect, and well, I have thoughts about that. In addition to his psychiatric work, Fanon wrote extensively about the effects of colonial attitudes on societies and the global struggle of decolonization. He personally participated in the struggle to liberate the Arab population of colonial Algeria from French control. I always rolled colonial as colonel at first, and I know it's not right. My work was focused on a time and place. I said as much at the start of my first book. The struggles of the colonized in Algiers were not the same as the colonized in the South Africa, the natives in South America, or the black community in America. There is a kinship between all the oppressed, which I suppose is why I stand here today, my writings deemed immortal by history. The specter of my old reflections hang over your ideals, whether you acknowledge it or not. It's probably better we acknowledge it. Fine, acknowledged, let's get started. Every institution in colonial societies, no matter how innocent seeming, serves to extend and enforce the culture of colonizers as the true culture. A multitude of moral teachers, counselors, and bewilders separate the exploited from those with power. In such a situation, the colonized have no choice but conform to succeed, adopting the manners of their oppressors. But true assimilation is impossible. The colonized will always be reminded of their otherness by a colonizer. No perfect society allows these inhumane conditions, so we must dismantle them by any means necessary. And so we are faced with an unwinnable dilemma. Governments demand we assimilate, and also demand we remember our place. We are forever caught between these two incompatible imperatives. This is the lived reality for the black, for the indigenous, and for any nation, or for any a nation actively oppresses. Assimilation added to the idea slate. Many oppressed individuals will go great lengths to prove that they can be part of the oppressor's culture. Alienation added to the idea slate. Native will never be allowed to fit into those who lord over them. They will always be reminded of their lesser origins. Now then, Senator, I believe you plan to let me have it. Yeah, I'm not doing that. And Annie, you can keep the lead. What? I'm an old white woman. The optics of my debating race are terrible. The last thing I need during election season is to get canceled. I hate you. Ah, my mind plushie. It fell over. In my rage. Oh my god. Look, it's like you said at the start. You don't have to prove he's wrong, just see if we can learn something. Nice to know you were actually listening, but why can't you do that? Because I'm bad at it. I'm bad at not arguing. This self-reflection may represent progress for the senator, I guess. That, or she's just doubling down on political cowardice. Well, okay then, Fannin. Let's see how this goes. Yes, I'm sure the process will be informative. Every institution in colonial societies, no matter how innocent seeming, served. Oh wait, we already read this. Colonizers is the true culture. Let's clarify. What do you mean by this? Societies are constructed around the values of their ruling population. The laws and norms of society naturally extend to those values, connecting them into place. So I can put my glasses back on. Can we back that? What evidence do you have to support this? Consider the matter of language. To speak a language is to take on a world, a culture. When a colonial power first takes over, they mandate all speak the language of the mother country. And in Martinique, it's not enough to speak French. Society demands you to speak a certain type of French. My own mother drilled this into me at a young age. We don't want any of that Creole nonsense around here. Dignified, proper, white French only. This is just one example. What do you eat with? How do you greet each other? Which drugs are permissible and which are not? All are defined by the colonists' culture. Okay. A multitude of moral teachers, counselors, and bewilders. Oh, right. What do you mean by this? There's no shortage, I'm going to sneeze, of individuals, even among the oppressed, who claim the downtrodden are where the downtrodden are where they deserve to be. Ain't that the damn truth? Either because the oppressed are inherently inferior, or they simply have not tried hard enough. What evidence do you have to support this statement? Colonists reserve the nicest homes, the finest schools, and the most respected jobs for themselves. The colonized are denied access to the necessary tools for success. As a result of this denial, only this denial, many in the native population become exactly what they are believed to be: poor, destitute, and uneducated. Through extraordinary fortune, some still may break through, climb the ranks of civilized society. But such individuals are then held up as proof as there is no real problem. If you only worked as hard as she had, you too could have had the deluxe model shack. God, yeah, that is so true. It's so true. It's like the amount of times I've heard people, oh, black people aren't oppressed, we had one as a president. Oh my goodness. Suffering. If America was so racist, how did we elect Obama? Through great suffering. It all makes it easier to believe that the native is wholly responsible for their position, which in turn justifies keeping them there. In such situation, the colonized have no choice but to conform to succeed, adopting the manners of their oppressors. What do you mean by this? To succeed in a colonized society, you must act like the colonizer. I've heard it said that America should be a melting pot, people from all over merging into one culture. Well, the pot is definitely hot, it scalds so many who try to jump in. I always prefer the term salad bowl ideal. Everyone maintains their own culture while contributing to the greater whole. That is a preferable mental model, but still so many desire to boil that salad into bland cultural sludge. I'm afraid I'm lost. Why does it matter how America cooks its citizens? I agree, Arbiter. These food metaphors are getting hard to swallow. Boo. Anyway, why do we demand a black man from Upper Niger wear shoes? Why do you act as if that is necessary to become the next Mozart? That is no less ridiculous than demanding a white man study Hindu lyricism, or else he'll never become an Einstein. And yet, if I show up to a job interview and something outside the cultural norm, be it a sari, a shuko, or a kilt, my prospects will be diminished. I hope I pronounced those right. Obviously, I know I pronounce kilt right. Like, it's, you know. Accents from there are strange or unintelligible, will only cause further damage. Dude, I hate it when people harp on accents. It absolutely boils my blood, man. The amount of people are like, oh, I can't understand their accent. They're from whatever country. And, like, have some introspection, man. You're from the South. They'd be saying the same thing about you, man. But now if I showed up in this dress in a suit, and if I walk the walk and talk the talk, well, my odds are a little better. A little better. A little better, for even if I do all those things, I'm still a black man. In such situation, the true assimilation is impossible. The colonized will always be reminded of their otherness by the colonizer. What do you mean by this? No matter how hard you try, you'll never be truly a member of the colonizing group. Whether they seize upon your mannerisms, your language, or your skin, you'll be signaled out as different. They won't let you forget. True assimilation is impossible. The colonized will always be reminded of their... Oh, wait, right. I keep reading these because I think it's like the next slide over or something. It really is impossible, though. I mean, sure, there are racists out there, but... I will speak to my own experience. To be black is to always be aware of your body, and by the way others see your body. For a time, among trusted friends, you can perhaps relax, but that only makes the sting worse when the illusion is shattered. I'll never forget the child who stopped in the street to tell his mother he was frightened by my mere presence. All I could do was laugh, but it wasn't funny. Even if the intelligible realm, I never know when I'll run into another Immanuel Kant situation. Kant came to agree with you. Yes, it only took 30 years to convince him I wasn't some genetic outlier. Might have gone more quickly if he didn't insist on consistently taking walks. That man's neuroses are overwhelming. If I had known my reward for philosophical clout was an eternity with history's neediest shut-ins. Oh boy. Alrighty. No perfect society would allow these inhumane conditions, so we must dismantle them by any means necessary. What do you mean by this? The colonial system is dehumanizing and fundamentally immoral. It must come to an end. Whatever it takes in order for mankind to move forward. And by whatever it takes, you mean whatever it takes. There can be no limitations on the fight for freedom. It's nice to dream of reform through speeches and negotiations, and certainly those should be attempted. But when those fail, we cannot stop there. The people will have to take up arms.
Nonsense!
Wait, hold on. I know I said I wasn't taking the lead, but this just took a hard left turn. I agree with these issues need to be addressed. During my time in office, I've tried my best to help to do so. But to advocate violence, it cannot come to that. Too many empty chairs at empty tables. We have to do...
Nonsense!
You have to be better if you can't. It does not surprise me that this is where we break, Senator. After all, you've staked your life on believing in the system. To consider a reality that conflicts with that, well, I'm sure it provokes dismay. Now, okay. Here's what I'm going to say. Here's me talking. To sort of go at the Senator for how she's written here. You cannot, to agree with Fannin here, is that, you know, as nice as pretty speeches and diplomacy is nice, there is no moral way to ask someone to get your boot off my neck. Sometimes the only way to get a boot off of your neck is to cut the ankle off. So there is times where, like Stonewall. Stonewall's a great example, right? LGBTQ people came together and rioted for rights because, you know, you can be as nice as you want, but if they keep the boot on your neck, sometimes you just got to go for the heel, you know? So yeah, it's, you know, it's, once again, a disconnection from reality that all problems can be solved with talking. But I'm not advocating violence, I'm advocating the end of violence. But you just said, I stand by what I said. Force cannot be eliminated as a tool in resisting oppression. Once again, there's no ethical way or no morally kind way to ask someone to get their boot off your neck. But that's not because violence is desired, it's because society makes it necessary. Allow me to elaborate. Though the colonized intellectual often seeks reform through political actions, such compromises inevitably fall short. Colonization is inherently violent. It relies on enforcing the idea that the native is weak or inferior. When the oppressed rise up in arms, the very notions upon which the colony is built are challenged. The system cannot survive the shock, thus revolutionary violence breaks the cycle of violence, rather than escalating it. You see, Senator? Violence is part of the remedy because violence is already in the system. And when we revolt, it's not in favor of a particular culture. We revolt because for many reasons we can no longer breathe. Do we really have no good examples of nonviolent reform? The Emancipation Proclamation, the Civil Rights Movement? Ah, yes. Well, you have to remember, the Civil Rights Movement, to say that it was nonviolent is just wrong, right? There were riots, you know, stuff happened. Obviously, it was mostly peaceful, right? But, you know, there was violence involved. Twice. So America solved racial injustice twice. I very much look forward to you solving it a third time. Each helped at least, but Pumpkin, neither of those were really peaceful. The Emancipation Proclamation came only in the third year of a war, and the civil rights movements involved countless clashes between protesters and the police. I see, very interesting. Tell me, Senator, how do you reconcile with this observation with your current ideals? Oh, well, shit. I mean, there's enough power in the Senate to correct these injustices. Of course there is, but maybe it wasn't used well historically. Of course. Indeed, many successful nonviolent movements worked because their leaders were presented as an alternative to the threat of violence. Violence was, therefore, still a key part of the solution. Okay, well, then, guess it's time for me to ask questions. Yippee, questioning time! Though the colonized intellectual often seeks... Oh, wait, right. Clarify. Just get all our bits and bobs out. What exactly is a colonized intellectual? A native who has obtained status in colonial society, often by translating the native experience for the colonizer. Their success is deeply rooted in the colonial system, so they have a vested interest in the system continuing. Now, these individuals are not uncaring to their fellow natives. They often attempt to use their status to appeal to those in power, but they limit these efforts to acceptable, polite channels, meeting the oppressors on their own turf. This approach gives them very little leverage, and without leverage, the results will be wholly inadequate. Politics involve negotiation. Negotiating involves compromise, right? Correct? Yes, that's the idea. Anyway. Well then, what's the compromise between continue the oppression and stop the oppression? Good news, everyone. We're doing a little less oppression. Confetti and drinks for all. A nice burst of serotonin, these little victories. They may even ease the tension for a while. But in the end, the system continues mostly as before. The native will still be held down. Alright. Colonization is inherently violent and relies on enforcing the idea that natives are weak and inferior. What do you mean by that? For as long as the colonial system is in place, violence against the colonized is a part of the daily life. Native communities are often underfunded and over-policed. Natives are viewed always as criminals and never as victims. And whether the force deployed is psychological or physical, it all works to keep the native in their place. I hate to ask for backing on this because it's very self-evident, but I digress. Organizations like the military and the police governments claim the only legitimate license for violence. And in colonial societies, the army laws actively seeks out the native, presuming they are guilty. I cannot count the number of times I was stopped by Algerian police solely because they mistook me for an Arab. When they discovered I was from Martinique, they apologized profusely. Of course, we know Martinian is quite different from an Arab. It's tripping over my words here. When I protested saying we are all the same, they laughed and replied, "You don't know them." There's always a target on someone, on whom varies from community to community, but the results are the same. And the violence is not always physical. Wars wage on both the body and the soul of the native. Depictions of the colonized as stupid, as pitiable, do real psychological harm to the native and settler alike. All are in key in colonialism, and all will persist as long as colonial thought does. Okay. When the oppressed rise up in arms, the very notions upon which the colony is built are challenged. What do you mean by this? Rising up, the native asserts their humanity. They proclaim loudly that their pain cannot be ignored. They will not remain neatly packed away out of sight and mind. What evidence do you have to support this statement? This is a logical extension of the previous statement. As the colony relies on the native being weak to justify their subjugation, the native fighting back challenges this core principle. If society depends on the sky being red and you pull back the curtain to reveal it as blue, there cannot help but be some shock. That or people explain it away with some bonkers reasoning. How can the sky be real if our eyes aren't real? Ah, yes. Confirmation bias is sinister, especially when combined with questionable logic. For a man whose only weapon is reason, there's nothing more necrotic than contact with unreason. Still, while some bunker themselves in denial, society as a whole will be unable to avoid the tremors caused by natives asserting their humanity. Okay. The system cannot survive the shock, thus revolutionary violence breaks the cycle of violence. The outbreak of violence challenges every element of the colonial system. Inevitably, under the strain, something gives way. It's backing, and it's pretty self-establishment. To understand why the same military force wouldn't steamroll any resistance. Interesting. Interesting. Understandable assumption, but for some reasons it's not that simple. In most colonial situations, the natives far outnumber the colonists, with the foreign military's resources split across multiple fronts. Simple truth is, the force required to suppress the combined will of the people is beyond even the most well-equipped superpower. Secondly, the conflict changed the economic calculus for the colonizers. Even if they could win, the war effort would destroy the resources that made the colony desirable in the first place. Finally, many colonialists are not true believers in the system. Faced with open conflict, they will sympathize with the oppressed. The longer the conflict rages, the more the sympathy grows. So, colonial leaders quickly learn the power of violence and find the answer is not to respond with greater violence, but to relax the tension. Okay, can we hold on to these points? They seem essential to me. I agree, Fennon. Would you add them to your argument? Of course. Back statements added to the argument. United as a whole, form force, clarification. People united will never be defeated. As the struggle for independence spreads throughout the whole of the native population, colonial forces will inevitably be overwhelmed. Bagging. Going to need more bagging on this. Weaponry can get pretty insane. It's a matter if you have more people and the other side is a tank. If the people charge the tank head-on, then yes, the tank will win. But people are resourceful and will favor guerrilla tactics over a head-on conflict. Now that's the damn truth. Furthermore, remember we are dealing primarily with situations where an outside country is exerting its influence on the local population. It takes far more effort to ship in a tank than it does for the native to recruit more numbers. The more brutal the tactics of the colonizer, the easier local recruitment becomes. The native forces will swell in proportion. So basically, as long as all the people stand together, they are destined to win. Indeed, the force needed to counter a united front is unsustainable, even for the greatest colonial power. Interesting. Cool. Great. Economically, it becomes more profitable for the occupier to withdraw in the hopes of preserving some form of relationship with the occupied. What do you mean by that? And all that struggle to maintain control of the colonies quickly became an exercise in self-harm for the colonizer. Continued occupation drains resources on all fronts. It spends riches already, obtained and damages those they still wish to extract. Bagging. Here, the force of capitalism actually work in the natives' favor, right? The economies of the colonies and their motherland are closely linked. War damages the whole institution. So, when faced with escalating conflict, the business owners and trade officers at home ask, why bother? Profit is their primary interest, and a potential trade deal with an independent country is far more advantageous than a futile fight to maintain control. Getting something is better than destroying everything. True. And when confronted with the reality of the native's humanity, many in the colonizing country will find their hearts aligned with the native. What do you mean by this? Colonists are not a monolith. Not all embrace the actions of their governments, and some will even fight against them. Few will even reveal themselves to be nearer to the national struggle than certain native sons. In the end, barriers in blood and race prejudice break down on all sides. Backing. Every civil struggle in history reflects this. The oppressed have always found allies among those who could have been or previously were oppressors. These individuals will never be the core of the struggle, but they can still help. As a colonial power is inherently more willing to listen to its own citizens, we should not underestimate pressure from within. Okay. Can we challenge anything here? I don't think alienation will work there necessarily. Can we challenge something here? Oppressed, united as a whole, form a force that no colonial power can hope to match. Press rise up in arms, very notions which colonies built upon are challenged. Nonsense. What about assimilation? But Fannin, what about natives who still want to be a part of the colonial society? An honest assessment, Ariadne. You are going in a good direction. But what are you trying to say doesn't truly counter this statement. The fact that you are trying to present these ideas we hear means perhaps you have not yet sufficiently dug in the alternative options. Look more closely, and maybe you could find another spot where this counterpoint would present a more fundamental conflict. Well, hold on. If you like where I'm going, can't you just let me go there? No, as I said, the logic does not fully connect. Do the work. Damn it. Okay, so we can use that. We can use that for sure. here. Damn it. Maybe this one? There we are. Okay, Fannin. This is a difficult topic, one I'm kind of unqualified to speak about. I just want to acknowledge that before, no more hand-wringing, Ariadne. Do not treat me like I am delicate. In return, I promise to do the same for you when you inevitably say something terrible. Right. Deep breath. Okay, here goes. You've talked at length about how far the colonized will go to be accepted by the colonists. Walking, talking, and dressing like settlers, all in hopes of improving their status in society. Correct. They have no other choice. You've also said, despite all obstacles in their way, some do integrate. Integrate, right? On some level, yes. Full acceptance is impossible, but they can obtain some degree of comfort. Well, then, we have a problem. Because resistance to colonial oppression, this cause that should unite the whole of the people, seems unlikely to unite the people at all. Oh? You've observed colonists are not a monolith. Not all will join their side in the struggle. But isn't that also true of the colonized? Many natives won't care about or will outright object to attempts to disrupt society. But the pitch is clearly a good one, no? An end to long-lasting inequalities? Sure, in the long term. But in the short term, the conflict will represent more instability and hardship, a bitter pill for anyone to swallow. We discussed this with Locke. People will often ignore long-term benefits if the short term is painful. Yes, that is a good point. Central to your argument of violence working is that the will of the people is enough to threaten the colonial power. After all, it's only because their power is threatened that they will make concessions. But if too many choose to sit out the struggle, the calculus changes fundamentally. It becomes much more plausible for the colonial power to nip the resistance in the bud. And in that case, violence won't accomplish anything at all. Aha! Aha ha 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 ha! Very, very good, Ariadne. Tragically, all these observations are valid. It even goes beyond sitting out. In Algeria, we had the Harkis, Muslims who joined the French to fight against their own people. Every societal group contains multitudes. A cause will never win 100% support. This is the reality all dreams of change must face. Great, so now not even the most drastic measures can solve the problems. Such an optimistic portrait you two have painted. Dude, Fannin's eating her up. He's writing her a goddamn essay about her. An interesting assertion, Senator, especially as we have not yet finished painting. Your daughter has correctly diagnosed these problems, but has taken their consequences too far. I have? You have. The complacency of many natives will not stop the resistance. It merely changes how it starts. Marx dreamed of workers' revolt to end injustice. However, the life of the native worker is too dependent on the colonial system. Would-be revolutionaries will be expelled from the unions and cities for challenging the structure of which others rely. There, among the destitute of the backcountry, the uneducated people whom the party ignores, the spark will actually light. Only then can revolution spread to the cities and to all people as the safety net crumbles. Facing multiple conflicts on multiple fronts, the colonial power will be forced to yield to the revolutionary leaders. With fighting at an end, the nation will finally be freed from all conflicts of the past. Simply put, the promise of glorious proletariat uprising is not enough for most workers to seek real change. Only among the neglected and the destitute can revolution actually spark. Oof, I bet Marx hates this argument. Kinda throws him and the working class under the bus. He spent quite a few of his sessions sprawled on my couch moping about it. You have a therapy couch here? I have a whole office. I need one. Philosophers have no shortage of baggage. You should hear Thomas Aquinas going on about his mother. Regardless, once the impoverished masses ignite into action, the security of the colonial system is proven to be an illusion. Suddenly, there's no reason for the rest of the nation to not join in. Whole of the people are united by the struggle. United struggle, adds to the idea slate. Impressively constructed, Fannin. Ariadne Jones, are you ready to continue your questioning? As I'll ever be. Alrighty. Clarify that for me. There's little doubt in my mind many of the injustices Mark observed are real. There's a significant overlap between the terror of capitalism and the terror of colonialism, after all. But his dream of glorious worker uprising is unlikely to occur in colonial countries. Backing. Simple observation, strings between native work and the colonial system are hardly hidden. They work in the settlers' factories, use the settlers' tools, and earn the settlers' currency to feed their families and build new homes. Their whole livelihood is rooted in the occupation. A revolution would risk everything. Would-be revolutionaries would be expelled from unions and cities. What do you mean by this? Those workers who do speak up, who highlight the clear injustice all around them, will be disowned by those who ostensibly protect them. For unions and local advocacy groups, such agitators will simply cause quote-unquote too much trouble, so they will be forced to leave before the occupying force catches wind and holds the union responsible. Guess they never get past the complaining on social media phase. I guess back that up. This is a logical extension of the point you raised, Ariadne. Those invested in colonial society will still want to remove revolutionaries before they became a problem. Revolutionaries will protest their way out, of course, and try to convince the others to fight. Revolution's imminent. What do you stall for? If you stand for nothing, what do you fall for? Come again? That was Hamilton. I quoted Hamilton just now. Seemed relevant. The hip-hop musical about your colonial founding fathers. I have thoughts about that, too. But even if revolutionaries did make arguments in verse, it would not be enough to convince their fellows to act. You stand for nothing, Burr. What'll you fall for? There, among the destitute of the back country, the uneducated people of whom the party ignores, actually spark light. Colonial life takes place mainly in the coastal cities. The inner country is ignored, left to local warlords and shamans. With little profit to be found there, neither the colonial forces nor the unions of the colonized pay these starving souls notice. This breeds extensive distrust between those in the city and those in the country. Ignorance allows hate to fester. So, while would-be revolutionaries failed in the city, their grievances are perfectly primed to ignite that hate into action. Just back that up for me. There are countless examples in history of country exploding in violence. The Mau Mau uprising in Kenya comes to mind. The neglected in the country are susceptible to any story of horror from the city. They have few references to distinguish fact from fiction. True stories of abuse get spun into even greater tales. Settlers bathe in native blood, grind their bones to make their bread. Finally, something snaps. Country folk descend to colonial institutions indiscriminately, attacking police and doctors alike. Driven by hate and spontaneous rage, they go further than the revolutionary exiles ever would have. And though these exiles hardly respect the ignorant in the country, they will happily take advantage of the chaos. Horror. Only then revolution can spread to cities, and to all people the safety net crumbles. The unrest is invited into a city by those struggling to survive, those unable to maintain the security of a job and home. And once fighting reaches the city, the colonial world is revealed as no true safe haven for the working native. With no reason to abstain from the fight, those once paralyzed by security will finally take up arms. Back that up for me, baby. Country folk view cities as the root of corruption. Inevitably, their rage turns towards them. Colonial military will follow, and once safe streets are thrown into chaos, against this backdrop, the revolutionary leaders return, their calls to resist now amplified by the reality of conflict. But people didn't want the revolution before, why would they now? Most feared the pain of change, but with fighting all around, the pain is already here. There's little left to lose and much more to gain. Yep, makes sense to me. Facing multiple conflicts on multiple fronts, the colonial power will be forced to yield to the revolutionary leaders. No colonial force can sustain itself indefinitely when being besieged from all sides. Efforts to do so only become more expensive with time. Back that for me. When the revolution is spread this widely, everyone fights as their individual conflict represents the whole of the nation. The colonials managed to suppress the embers at one location, the fires only burn more brightly elsewhere. As a result, trying to maintain control stops being an appealing prospect for the colonizing country. As I mentioned in the previous argument, attempts to do so amount to economic self-harm. With fighting at an end, nation will finally be freed from all conflicts of the past. The colonists retreat from city and country, revolutionaries will be ready to fill the void. Independence is finally achieved. Alright, what's the backing for that? Don't just say your argument. Appears pretty self-evident, does it not? If the colonists withdraw, the future is in the hands of the native once more. What's stopped them from charting a better course forward? But what's stop them from charting a worse course back? Ah, me. Damn it! I was thinking like, oh, it's like a workers' bourgeoisie again. Safety net crumbles. What's my idea box here? Assimilation, alienation, colonized intellectual, uniting struggle. Okay, hold on. We do it here and then we do uniting struggle. Because he said earlier that the revolutionaries don't like the cities and the country don't like each other. Chain of cause and effect you've mapped out is incredibly intricate. You've tracked many different social factors and divides between groups to plot a path to successful decolonization. Holds up pretty well right up until the end. The biggest force keeping the people united. The revolutionary struggle itself. So tell me, Fannin, what happens when the struggle comes to an end? Oh, excellent catch, Ariadne. I can't believe I missed that. Seems to me there are two toxic hierarchies in your worldview. The first is the relationship between the colonized and the colonized. The second is the relationship between the city and country. Neither relationship is healthy, and the colonial system definitely plays a part in making each worse. But the tension between city and country won't just disappear when the colonial power retreats. And when the common enemy is removed, all that distrust and suspicion will be front and center. But there's a good deal of nuance there. Not everyone in each group will. I appreciate your commitment to not generalizing, Fannin, like honestly. But the fact that we can say not all revolutionaries doesn't change the fact that by your own analysis, the divide here is enormous. And there's no doubt those in the city emerge from the struggle in a far better position than the country folk. What's to stop the revolutionaries in the city from focusing on themselves? Or even worse, re-establishing an exploitive relationship with the country? To leave this problem unsolved feels like a job half done. The points you've raised are, once again, astute. In the aftermath of a revolution, we frequently see the revolutionaries act just as you say. They focus on enriching themselves while the country drifts back into ill-informed poverty, no better off than during the colonial regime. These heads of government sell their country to the most terrifying of all enemies, ignorance. Of course, the old colonial power takes no small joy in this. Look how things have gone to hell since we've left. We are right about those savages all along. How depressing. Even after all that bloodshed, nothing really changes. Oh, I strongly disagree. This half-done job is still better than one unstarted. Did you all believe dismantling colonialism would be clean and easy? No, of course not. But having no guarantee that life will actually improve for those who fought, progress or not, that's really, really rough. Guess we'll just have to keep...
Nonsense!
A moment, please. Our appointment is not yet over. This is not the first time I've reviewed this problem. A significant part of my work was dedicated to it. There's a way to build a better end state for all involved. Is it more violence? No, not if done correctly. Though, if not, who knows? Present me, boy. In the aftermath of revolution, the middle class and revolutionary party can easily slip into the oppressive void left by colonists. They'll rely on nationalism and prejudice to prop themselves up instead of doing the hard work of support. I just realized I kind of said boy. I didn't mean it like that. I just thought about what I said. I didn't mean it like that. Fuck. Damn it. I didn't mean it like that. It's my bad. They will rely on nationalism and prejudice to prop themselves up instead of doing the hard work of supporting the people. To prevent the new government from betraying the people, we must reject centralized notions of leadership in favor of education. Thus, the development of government is bound with the development of the people as a whole. So you see, the revolutionary part was focused on raising up the people around them. We must rid ourselves of the contemptuous assumption that the masses are incapable of governing themselves. We ought to uplift the people, develop their brains, fill them with ideas. Only then can we rebuild in a way that actually benefits all, overcoming our last great obstacle and preventing the need for a second revolution down the line. Yes, everything can be explained to the people on the single condition that you really want them to understand. This is surprisingly a lot like the dream of Capra. Finding ways to bring philosophical education to all, to give everyone opportunities they didn't have before. I've never doubted many of our ideals are aligned, Senator. But I'm deeply skeptical your government will ever have have the will to realize such selfless aim. Ouch. Look, I've got problems with Mom's plans too, mainly the part where they trapped her in a philosophical afterlife, but let's lay off for a bit. Very well, we'll return to my own thesis. Ask your questions, Ariadne Jones. Okay. In the aftermath of the revolution, middle class and the Revolutionary Party can easily slip into the oppressive void left by the colonists. What do you mean by this? You know that the revolutionaries are well positioned to take over the colonial system. Left unchecked, they can pocket an enormous portion of the nation's wealth and never return it to the people as a whole. I feel like I need the backing of this because I've already, gotten it. They'll rely on nationalism, prejudice to prop themselves up, instead of doing the hard work of supporting the people. What do you mean by this? Nationalist rulers of underdeveloped countries will not do any real work on behalf of the people. Instead, such leaders attempt to keep the people complacent, fanning the flames of suspicion against a series of scapegoats. It does not stop with those who were once settlers. Different tribes, different ideologies, all will be targeted. As the time passes, the boogeymen change. From immigrants to the government that can control weather to whatever. God, sounds so familiar. But there's always someone to hate, and the government will use that hate to keep control. Oof. Oof, indeed. Tribalism and the idea slate. I guess back that up. I mean, pretty obvious. Power and prejudice are a dangerous combination. Colonial times, prejudice existed on both sides, but power was entirely in the hands of the settlers. Post-independence, however, the formula is different. The hate of the native is given preference. Citizens will demand foreigners be purged from public life, and since doing so doubles as consolidating power for the government, it will oblige. Golly gee, that sounds so familiar, doesn't it? Thank God that doesn't happen in today's America. Cool. To prevent the new government from betraying the people, we must reject centralized notions of leadership in favor of education. What do you mean by this? How decentralized are we talking? We going full anarchy, Fannon's cool, no rule school? Not at all. The free form of nature of anarchism would struggle to elevate and inform the uneducated as needed. This does mean, however, we must avoid having all the power concentrated in one place. Leadership, education, defense, all should be brought to the people nationwide, not hoarded by bureaucrats in cities. Still, I'd like to hear more about how, if we can. Fair enough. I will expand on these ideas. Statement updated. Figureheads would be with great skepticism, talk of unity, so key during the struggle, become a tool of subjugation. What do you mean by that? Keep a careful eye on those who led the people in the past. Where once their powers of persuasion were used for good, I dropped my dice, that's why my voice went like that, now they are all likely to be used for ill. Just back that up for me. Desire for a hero is always questionable, and it encourages people to look to the top instead of their fellows to improve their situation. During the revolution, such figureheads had a use, awakening the people and settling on them on a forward march, heroic and unmitigated. But after the revolution, the leaders' talk of unity is no longer a call to action, it is a call to complacency. They put the people to sleep and 3 or 4 times a year ask them to remember the colonial period and bask in how far they've come. Once you were stepped on by foreign colonists, now you are stepped on by people who look just like you. Yes, we must prevent the party from ever becoming a willing tool in the hands of a leader. Alright. Leadership must instead be spread among the country, educating and evaluating the people of the region in which they are embedded. What do you mean by this? The leading members of the party ought to avoid the capital as if it had the plague. By locating themselves among the country instead, they will have to serve the needs of each region, and primary among those needs is education. Just back that up. When you live in a place for long enough, you become connected to it, so the leaders will become connected to the people of regions otherwise ignored. They will see what is lacking, for it is lacking for them too, and leverage the national apparatus to fix the issues. Sometimes foreign technology and assistance may be required, but in the process, the natives should always be educated on these tools. Thus, the people will learn to build their own bridges and man their own machines. Soon they are innovating beyond the template of before. Yeah, makes sense. In place of standing army, citizens should be armed. Any conflicts that must be fought should be handled by this militia. What do you mean by this? We should have no permanent soldiers, and the number of permanent officers should be kept to a minimum. Instead, the people should be prepared as a militia, ready to fight if the need arises, but dedicated to other tasks. Just back that up, because armies are pretty useful. The army becomes self-sustaining body. Sooner or later, it will find itself without any definite mission. Idle generals will draw upon their own manifestos and come to threaten the government. The only way to avoid this is to refocus these individuals on other tasks. An engineer is 1,000 times more indispensable to a country than an officer. After all, unless an external power attempts to assert control, what threat would demand a standing army? Bring up the killer tomatoes. Don't mention tomatoes. Yeah, maybe no tomatoes today. I feel like there might have been an achievement for bringing up the killer tomatoes, but I digress. Thus, development of government is bound with the development of the people as a whole. Government is not for the people, it's of the people. The growth of the government must grow to the people as well. We must try relentlessly and passionately to teach the masses that everything depends on them. If we stagnate, it is their responsibility, and if we go forward, it's due to them too. Now, what's the backing of that? As long as the people remain uneducated, there's no hope for a nation to elevate itself. Everything we've discussed illustrates this. But with the whole of the national apparatus focused on education, we can build a successful nation. Okay. Development countries bound with development? Hold on. Once this becomes tribalism.
Nonsense!
Okay, first things first. If mistrust between the city and country is the last great obstacle for nation building, you have a nice plan to tackle that mistrust, focusing on the entire national apparatus, on empowering the neglected. That'll do a lot for good. Or of good. Oh, how interesting. Is this it, then? Has Fanon found the ideal approach to government? Well, he's tackled what was presented as the last great obstacle, but beyond that obstacle lurks several hundred more. Writing. Oh no, what he's writing now. Bombastic exclamations are endearing, but often thinly justified. Better get to the point, Ariadne. As Fanon laid out the problems with post-colonial governments, one thing became clear. City and country is not, in fact, the only toxic dynamic that remains. Society contains countless ethnic, political, and religious divisions, each bound with their own explosive package of resentment. So we have more steps to take. I'm aware of this. I highlighted these problems myself. As we raise the people up, we find ways to address them. Well, there's the rub. The methods you propose to raise people up to avoid clash between city and country, they make countering other conflicts far more difficult. Having remote pockets of government focused on local issues is wonderful for activism, and a militia instead of an army definitely puts power in the hands of the citizens. But things get more complicated when local population A hates local population B. If you train them all to fight and remove all the countermeasures, what do you do if they turn on each other? If we raise them up, teach them all to be better. But you said yourself, no cause gets 100% support. Some will inevitably act on old hatred. You also stated that when fighting breaks out, the safety net collapses, reasons for restraint disappear. You'll wind up with a free-for-all with no one capable of reining it in. Fanon, you're covering the floor with gasoline and hoping no one lights a match. Oh god, he snapped. Remarkable fortitude under duress for someone of her background, Ariadne Jones is capable. Thank you. Sometimes when I am feeling truly self-destructive, I review the more recent history of Algeria, country I fought so hard to liberate. I wasn't alive when independence was achieved. If I had been, maybe I could have made a difference. But the country's history is dominated by coups and civil wars, everything I hope to avoid, all rooted in the fundamental failure of the government to unite its people. Factionalism may have fruited under colonialism, but it's also a sociological fact that no theory of unity can abolish. And yet, I still believe somewhere out there a bright new future none of us have imagined awaits. Something different from the European models of the past, paying regard to the prodigious thesis she has put forward, but also aware of her crimes. We can turn over a new leaf, we can work out new concepts, and set forth a new man. Yes, I still believe, despite all evidence. Forgive me my small cognitive dissonance. Of course, Fanon. Pythia Smith, I have one last thought for you as well. I can, on some level, appreciate your belief in the system. Surely democracy should be able to empower the people and change what needs to be changed, but whatever the merits of the ideas, the actions of European men have failed to bring the problem of mankind to an infinitely higher plane. Do not be another who falls short. Fight past all the barriers, whatever it takes. Perhaps you just can. Thank you, Fannin. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. 5th chapter of Pro Philosopher 2. Done. Frontier Psychiatrist. That was... Hey, at least you kind of got his endorsement at the end there, right? As much as he'd ever endorse someone so embedded in the colonial system. And that's what you wanted. You have to feel good about that, huh? I don't know anymore. What? Adney, Look, I'm tired. Tired of disappointing you. No. It's time for me to admit what's been obvious from the start. Our system isn't perfect. And I guess I'm walking evidence of that, huh? In my position, constantly vying for supporters any way you can, admitting you've changed your mind can be a death sentence. People who agreed with you before feel betrayed. People who agree with you now mock you for being so slow, or doubt your sincerity. So the longer I participate, the more I dig in. I stop learning and I just fight. I fought Confucius, I fought you, I fought everyone we've encountered. I don't even question what I believed. Or I didn't even question what I believed. Deep down, it's just what I had to do. No perfect system would encourage such a toxic cycle. Mom, I don't believe it. Why now? I tried to tell you this. Dad tried to tell you this. We all tried to tell you this. I don't know. I was so focused on the good I thought I could do. I guess I didn't care. But I'm going to lose my election, Adney. I'm going to lose, so what does it matter? Well, I don't know if that's true or not. Not really. But no matter what, at least we can get you out of here for now, right? That's the most important thing to me. It's true. Pythia Smith's viewpoint has fundamentally shifted, it seems. Tell the gate what you've learned. Let the way home open. Very well. Gate, here's the answer. One I should have given a long ago. People have views that don't make sense, that are often driven by spite. They'd rather vote for someone who gives them easy answers, someone like Tucker, than pursue hard truths. Knowing we're all so lost, how can anyone ever hope to govern well? In the end, my daughter was right. There's no societal structure that won't have fatal issues. Nothing happened. Maybe it didn't hear you? No, it heard her. Then I don't understand. That felt right, Adney. It felt honest, more honest than I've been in my years. I've been in years. And it isn't all what it's supposed to take, Arbiter. Isn't it that all it was supposed to take, Arbiter? The answer to that was true? Proof I can grow? Well, what's more true than humanity's ability to utterly screw itself? I'm afraid the way remains closed to you. So that's it, then. Mom, I'm sorry, Adney. I don't think there's anything more I can do. The gate is never going to open. I'm stuck here. Oh, damn. Well, that brings us to the end of this video. Bit of a little bit longer than the other, huh? Anyway, that was a good one. We debated Fannin on colonialism and society, if you will. And yeah, that was very fun. So, if you made this fun video, thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, or don't. I'm not your mother, but you better brush your teeth. Have a good one. Bye-bye.